Hi, this is Dr. Carl Goldkamp. A few things I have to say. One is, we personally are involved both as a lifestyle, the ketogenic diet, but also through my 16 years of clinical practice of what is effective. What do people need to take sometimes, all the time, to support their ketogenic diet? You'll get bits and pieces of this ongoing week after week. It's important to be comprehensive. In one way it's simple, and one way it's a little bit complicated. Okay, welcome back everybody to the next episode of the Keto Naturopath. I'm Dr. Carl Goldkamp, and today we have a fun surprise, an interview with Ellen Davis. Ellen Davis has been very helpful in my life personally, and this is why I'm supposed to be reading from her particular biography she sent me, and I will in a second, but this is a little bit bigger. So I got an email, because I'm on one of her email lists, probably 3 years ago, that there was going to be this conference down in Florida of these people that were the names that I knew that were outstanding specialists in the ketogenic world. So that was Jeff Volek, Dr. Eric Westman, I think Steve Finney. Anyway, so I go, oh yeah, I want to go. So I called up and they're all sold out. And I go, I can't believe that. How did I miss this? And so Ellen finagles, I shouldn't say this, somehow a ticket became available. And I did get in, and we did go down. And it was phenomenal research. I mean, just the presentations from Tana Siegfried, and, you know, there's like the baseball team of all-stars showed up. And there's only, I think, about 60 of us at that first conference. And I'm thinking, amazing. 60 of us, and all these people from more or less around the world, certainly North America. So Ellen helped me with that. And so I lost Ellen. All right. Lost Ellen for a second, and now we're back. So that was the first introduction from Ellen, helping me out of the anonymity of email. And so now I'm down to the conference. I met her personally and had this wonderful experience. And so when I got there, I realized I knew that she had written a number of books, and she's an author. She, in fact, in my mind, is the most prolific author in the ketogenic diet that you can find, but I'll get back to that. So we're sitting into basically the intro of the conference, which is Dominic D'Agostino. It's more or less was his conference, and it's called the Metabolic Therapy Conference. So as we're sitting down, he says, you know, this is where I go for information. This is where I tell my students to go for information. And he puts Ellen's website up there and the books that she had written at that point, and said, you know, this is probably the most comprehensive place to go for information. A whole year later, the second Metabolic Therapy Conference, he does that, and he adds a few other books. But the reason I say that is that Ellen is a wealth of information, you know, and her background, she's an MS in clinical nutrition, so she has that desire in herself. She has a great personal story, which hopefully we'll get to a little bit. But that's how important this interview is if you're interested in the ketogenic diet. The what and the how. Everybody has their esoteric questions. We all go down our rabbit holes in various directions, but the concept is easy enough. But the little details are things you need to figure out for yourself. And that's why we all read these things again and again and again. So welcome, Ellen Davis.
Well, thank you for having me. It's great to be with you. This is fun.
Absolutely. I'm going to now add to that. Ellen's brief bio that she would like me to have is like, she's an expert, no doubt, on a ketogenic diet. Accomplished author. She has at least 4 books up on relative to ketogenic diet on Amazon, and alternative health advocate. Her website's ketogenic-diet-resource.com.
You can just type ketogenic diet resource all together and it'll still get there.
Okay. Good point.
That's just a little aside there, but yeah, I'm doing good. I am glad to be on the call with you and answer questions and talk with you, because I enjoy talking with you. I'm glad we've become friends over the years. So.
Absolutely. I feel very lucky, out of the blue.
You're just so complimentary. It's like, I just feel like I'm this person out here writing on ketogenic diets, right? It's like, I'm just a nobody, I'm not Dominic D'Agostino. And you just always treat me like I'm royalty. I just love it.
In part that's me, but no, it's, to be genuine, when people start reading your books and see your website, they come away with, oh my God, this person has done a lot of work, has an incredibly attuned sense of organization and actionable offerings of information. So I stumbled into you. It's cliche to say that, but, and who wouldn't be thankful for the person who slipped him into that conference? So,
yeah, yeah, and I did finagle. I'll put that word out there because I know Angela Poffin, the person who was kind of running it for Dom, and all I did was just make a phone call and ask her if there's anything left, and she said sure. So
super.
But I'm glad that I did that because I got to meet you. And it was just funny how we just kind of accidentally sat together in that.
That was funny.
In that first talk, Yep. It was interesting.
Yep. I felt relieved, actually. You never knew who you're going to meet. And going to this conference, it was already a lot of heavy hitters. It's like, and suddenly having you sit down next to me, I go, she's just a regular person. I could actually talk to this person.
Yeah. I try to remain a regular person because all I'm doing is, collating information, right? Like I go out and I read all the papers, and I just try to repackage it so that it's understandable to the layperson. That's where my expertise is. I understand all the biochemistry and I understand all that stuff, and then I can translate it so that people can understand, because sometimes when Dominic talks, you're like, what did you just say?
Yep.
Because he's just so high level, and, and I just like for it to be available for everybody, the information. So I just try to rewrite it so people can understand it.
Yeah, that's a good way of referencing it. So let me give you my perspective. Here's the problem with physicians in general. I mean, I would say actual physicians, and so I'm not really practicing anymore. I mean, I coach a few people when it comes up if I feel it's necessary, but I did that for 16 years. And your head is so in the trenches, I would say 24/7. You don't have time really to be current on new ideas, unless something is forced. You'll go to a conference and you hope that that's going to give you the best information, and you try to qualify the conferences you go to, and that's it. And then you go back to, charting and organizing and follow up and all the office. I don't say it's BS, but it's your practice. This is your business. And so you become progressively more and more uneducated. So to all the work that you do, it's like, it's a godsend. You go, gosh, this is, does she follow these people around? That's what I come away with.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you, because I had never heard that perspective. I mean, I know that I kind of get annoyed, that physicians don't. I'm like, I'm a layperson and I know more than you about this. What is that?
Right.
But I forget, that there's a perspective there that they are just head in the trenches, and the ones where I really get curious about are the ones who just refuse to even read it.
Yep.
They'll learn it from a patient or whatever, and they don't ask, like, oh, how did you get your HbA1c down that low? Just by changing your diet. It doesn't occur to them to go, because my feeling about that is like, then you could help so many other people, that you're treating. So I just wish they would. I asked Dr. Runyon about that one time. He's my co-author from my book. He's a physician and a type 1 diabetic. And I asked him, why is this so difficult for doctors to understand? Patients get it right away. If you tell if you explain it to a type 2 diabetic and you say, well, here's your trigger, carbohydrates, and if you cut those back, then you'll have less symptoms, and they get it and they're like, oh, but a doctor's like, I'm not sure about that. I think you should probably eat your fruits and vegetables and, your whole grains or whatever. So I asked Dr. Runyon why, and he said, well, he says, it's best I can tell, it's because when we're taught in medical school, we're taught that if it's real, it'll be taught to us. If it's not, it's probably a fad or junk information.
That's a good.
So he goes, I blame it on educators in medical school.
I agree. So I'm a naturopathic doctor, so I always have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder towards MDs, but some MDs are just, like brethren. So I would say there's always been this big gap between, and I would put ketogenic diet into a natural medicine sort of thing. We're talking about macros. Doesn't get any more natural than that.
Right.
But, I've practiced, and across the street, there's an MD that has nothing, he might even share some patients, and to be unwilling to talk to me. So it's almost like medical segregation, and I go, what is that about? And
it doesn't serve anybody.
Yeah.
Right.
And so now in the ketogenic diet, even in the naturopathic community, there's this rift as well. There's some that have opened up to it, especially in cancer and so on. But there's others that saying, you're a foolish person. Your medical license should be taken away. And it's like, so I can't understand. So it exists out there. I think there's people that want to,
especially with all the research, right? It's one thing to, put out something that's not been researched or doesn't have anything behind it, and then to get that accusation. But to say that to somebody after all the research that's been done from the 1960s, 1950s, Cahill's research and all of the stuff that's out there proving that the brain can use ketones as an alternative fuel when glucose is low. I mean, that to me is dishonest, and it's ignorant.
Yep.
And I get emails from dietitians every once in a while taking me to task, in quotes, task for what I tell people. And I just write back to them and say, get a clue, go read the research. Here are 10 cardio, surgeons who agree with me. And when I'm feeling really mean, I'll say, you just wasted $50,000 on an education to teach you a thing.
Right. Good for you. No, feel free to be mean. Yeah. I find that, looking, no, absolutely. No, I not encouraging murder here by any means, but, being euphemistic.
Yeah, no, it's usually when they're mean to me, then I'll be, if they're kind and they just are asking, I won't hit them like that. But there are a couple that will, same thing, tell you shouldn't have, your nutrition license, blah, 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 and just you're a terrible person. Then, I feel like, okay, gloves are off. So.
It's good to know.
Let me just right back to you.
Yeah.
Here.
Well, I figured with all the work you've done, there had to be a degree of strong angst behind all, to get you motivated to do all that. So it's good.
Oh, yeah. That was my own health. I was trying to fix myself.
Yeah. Let's go with that. So,
Absolutely.
I mean, I've read your history. So everybody wants to know the personal story. So besides you saying, I'm going to write these books and collaborate with these people because it's evolving. How did you get into it? And why did you even look in this direction? Because I'm amazed that everybody's not doing this, but back in 2008 or 2011, heads started turning gradually there. There wasn't these conferences that are now, for sure.
Yeah. So in 2008 is when I started writing websites. The first one I wrote was called Healthy Eating Politics, and it was about the whole cholesterol lie. And that all started because back then, when was it? God, that's like 10 years ago. I was really sick. I was losing my vision. I was, burning in my feet. I never went and got tested, but I would imagine that I had full-blown type 2 diabetes. And I'm sure that my blood sugar was high because I had all the symptoms of it. And my mother was a type 2 diabetic. My grandmother was type 2 diabetic. And I watched my mother, she died at 63 from the complications of cancer and diabetes. And
way too young.
Oh, yeah, way too young. Yeah, it was devastating for our family. But I used to, when I was in my 20s, I used to help her give herself her insulin shots. And at the time, it was just like, that's just what you did, right? My mom takes insulin and this is what we do. And, it never really, I didn't have any interest at the time in nutrition or any of that because, I'm 20 and I'm just doing my life. But she passed away at 63 from cancer, and we all, I'm sure everybody knows how strong the connection is between cancer and insulin and high blood sugar. So I'm sure that's had something to do with it. And so when I got into my 40s, I started having these health issues, joint pain and just feeling tired all the time. And then that progressed to these symptoms of diabetes. And I just, one day, I don't know, a lightning bolt hit me and I thought, I'm going down the path my mother's going down and I don't want to go down that path. So I started looking at what I was eating. And the first thing I did was take all the processed food out of my diet, anything boxed or in a bag or anything like that. And I felt better. And I thought, well, maybe I'm on something, So I started doing some research and I read Dr. Ead's book, Protein Power, Life Plan, and great book. And that kind of turned me on to the whole cholesterol thing and low carb diet. So I started writing Healthy Eating Politics to put down some of that information and started implementing some of his things into my diet. So I started cutting out major carbohydrates like, pasta and stuff like that. And I started feeling better. And then I kept writing my website and kept learning more and reading more. I read a whole bunch of other books. I read Anthony Copo's Cholesterol Con and a whole bunch of other books about cholesterol. So right then at that point, I was kind of focused on the cholesterol thing and the heart disease because that was the scariest thing, right? So if I do this, am I going to get heart disease? So I wrote a lot about that. And really, I wrote my websites to teach myself. So I was just teaching myself about diet and stuff. So at one point, probably 2 years into it, I decided, okay, I'm going to go super low carb. I'm going to go to 20 carbs a day. just like, because I think I got a hold of the Atkins book and I was reading that. I'm like, okay, I'm doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So I start that program. Day 1, doing great. Day 2, doing great. Day 3, I'm out running errands. And on the way back, I had a hypoglycemic episode that made me have to stop driving my car, stop at a 7-Eleven and get a banana to eat because I was shaking so bad.
Mm-hmm.
That's how bad my insulin. That's when I learned about insulin resistance, because I'm like, what is this? My heart is pounding. My face is numb. I'm shaking. It scared the lights out of me. It scared me. And I thought, what am I doing with, this diet? So I got home and I started doing some reading on that, shook for about 6 or 8 hours after that. I still was shaking, it's 6 hours later. It was bad. And I thought, okay, so I can't do 20 carbs. Nobody was really talking about that. I really couldn't find any information about it. I just figured, that my blood sugar was too low. I didn't really know about reactive hypoglycemia at that point. So I thought, well, it must be my blood sugar. So I'm eating crackers and I'm trying to get my blood sugar back up. The whole day I just shook. And that was a, seminal experience for me because it really scared me. And so then I decided, okay, well, maybe I'll just cut back to 100 carbs a day. So I cut back to 100 carbs a day for about a week or two, and I didn't have any reactions. And then I said, okay, I'm going to try to go to 80. So I had to slide into low carb like that way because my insulin resistance was so bad that I couldn't do the full 20 carbs a day at the beginning. So I had to, go lower. It took me about 6 months to be able to get to a point where I could do 20 carbs a day without having a reaction.
Wow.
And I don't even know what my insulin was at that point, because 2 years after that, I'm still doing low carb. I'm still doing, 20, 30, sometimes 50 carbs a day. And I went and had my insulin checked, and it was still 27 on a scale of 3 to 19.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Nice.
So I have no idea what it was when I had that reaction. It was probably off the chart. Yep. And it's about that time I started thinking about doing a website on really low carb diets. And I chose the ketogenic diet word because that was the word that was more, nobody was really talking about it from that angle. So from a business standpoint, that was a better choice for a keyword. And I had no idea what all this stuff that's happened since was going to happen. I just wanted to write this website for myself.
Yeah.
So I start writing the website, and I'm about 40 pages into it, and I find Dominic's blog online.
Yeah.
So I send him an email. And I said, hey, when you get your blog fleshed out, because he only had a couple pages on it at that time, but he was talking about his research. I said, hey, when you get this fleshed out, let me know, and we'll link, together to help our traffic or whatever. And he writes back, he was like, oh my God, I love your site. I'm just going to give everybody your site, So I was just like, really? And he was like, yeah, so we talked on the phone, and he was a really nice man. And, so 6 months after that, I think it was in December, I was at work. At the time, I was working for the feds as an IT manager and still doing my websites on the side. And I'm at work, and I get home, and I check my traffic on my website because that's my little business on the side. And I had gotten 40 emails from people from my website. And I'm like, what is going on? And I look at my traffic, and it spiked to 10,000 people. At the time, I was getting about 100 people a day. And I'm like, whoa, who linked to me? So I go out looking, and Dominic never told me this, but he went and talked. He had an interview with the Christian Broadcasting Network, and he gave them my website.
Oh, amazing.
So suddenly I was getting, I'm like, wow, because I don't know what their watchership is or whatever you call it, their ratings, but suddenly I had 10,000 visitors to my website every day, and this lasted for 3 or 4 months. And I started getting emails from people all over the world about how to implement a ketogenic diet for cancer, because that's what the interview was about. They were interviewing Fred Hatfield, I think is his last name, a friend of Dom's, and how he'd put his cancer into remission with a ketogenic diet. And then they talked to Dom in the interview. And so I started getting emails from people all over the world asking me about how to implement a ketogenic diet for cancer. And I'm sending back, little cobbled together emails. I'd write Dominic and ask him what he thought about this. And then I found Tom Seyfried's book, so I read that. And then I started, contacting Dr. Seyfried. What do I say to this person? And that went on for about a month. And then finally, this lady wrote to me, and I'll never forget it. It was on a Saturday morning. Her name was Lisa Duck. She wrote to me. She says, I just want to see my kids grow up. And I went, whoa. And I thought, I have to write a book for people. I mean, this email thing ain't getting it. So I called up Dom and I said, why hasn't anyone written this book? Is there like a legal issue or why hasn't it been written? He's like, I don't know. He's like, I don't have time to write it.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't have time to write it. So I got a hold of Dr. Seafried and I said, would you mind if I wrote a patient book and kind of based it on your book? And he said, no, write it. I get questions all the time. So I'm like, okay, well, I wrote the book and I released it. And a huge amount of interest. I think I sold 400 copies in the first month.
Nice.
And then a bunch of people had questions. So I revised it and answered those questions and then released a second version. And that was out there for 3 years. Yeah, 3 years, I think. And I just revised it to the third edition with the new research.
Yep.
So that book is how I kind of got started into writing books. And I thought, well, if that book is going to do so well, and then I met Dr. Runyon and he wanted to write a book. So I was like, well, let's write 2 diabetes books on this. And so we ended up writing books together and then they're out there now and I've just revised them as well. And so that's how it all got started. It kind of snowballed after Dom gave my website to the Christian Broadcasting Network because I started going to the conferences and meeting people and I added more research to my site and started really looking at what other diseases could be treated with this, and just kind of snowballed.
Absolutely. No, it's such a great story. You started with and it was about you doing it for you and sharing the information. Lucky you met Dom, and it went from there. So, and actually your books...
Really, I truly credit him with a lot of my success. He is just the most generous, sweetest person you'll ever meet, on top of being gorgeous and smart.
And being able to deadlift 500 pounds.
I get jealous of him because he's got the Trinity, right? He's gorgeous, he's smart, and he's really nice. Yeah, well,
or add one, plus he's wicked strong.
Yeah, plus he's wicked strong, yeah.
There's a lot of things. There's 2 things. It's like the attitude that exists in call it the family, or the people, so Tom as well, is like, these people were not territorial. These people were about, hey, get the information out there. And often you come into something and it's a little more protective now. We're in a different world, 5 years later, less than that.
Oh, yeah.
But then he's absolutely go do it. I'm too busy. And then Tom Seifert, he basically owned the ketogenic cancer world in the metaphoric sense. And certainly Travis Christofferson sort of summarized that. And it's just the attitude of, you go do it. People need this. And I just love that attitude. It's such a good attitude.
Yeah, you're right about that. Absolutely. Not once did I get any pushback or no, that's mine or anything like that at all. They were like, yeah, go do it and promote my book continually. Both of them do. And I also send them 10% of the profits every quarter and have been doing that since the book was released because I feel like, okay, well, I wouldn't have this book if it wasn't for them.
Excellent.
In their research. So I try to give back to their research that way,
Absolutely. It's tithing. However, I mean, that is so cool. I mean, you thank the hand that feeds you, so to say. I wanted to go back and just sort of ask a few questions. So in your own progress, back to your story, when people jump back and forth and say, I did my 20 carbs, 50 carbs, 100 carbs, and they give the grams. When did you learn you had to be precise? You're a kind of precise person, obviously, but what I find...
I don't know that I've learned that yet. Because I'll just tell you something about me. As much knowledge as I have about this, I am not good about implementing it for myself. Part of that was that 2 years ago, I developed breast cancer. So that was blow for me. Like it kind of shook me up like, okay, I'm already eating low carb.
Right.
And I still developed breast cancer. So it kind of really shook my world a little bit. And now at this point, back on track and doing much better. But for about a year after that, I wobbled badly because it just scared me so much. And so I'm not in the best shape that I've ever been in right now, but I'm on my way back. Before that happened, I tried to stay around, 50 carbs a day, and my weight maintained itself. But even with eating 50 carbs a day, sometimes I'd go to 20 when I got mad, because I gained a pound or whatever. And 50 carbs a day for me is like a couple of berries and, some dairy.
Yep.
This is not, eating jelly beans and, I don't eat junk food.
Right.
I eat regular food. I eat meat and a few vegetables, and I have a little bit of berries, and I love dark chocolate. So those are the things that I was eating. But I have never been able to lose weight on ketogenic diet. I think my insulin, given my story, my backstory, I think my insulin is I think there's some genetic issues with my insulin metabolism and with fat metabolism, because no matter how low carb I eat, I don't lose weight until I go to like 950 calories a day.
Yeah.
And I've done that before. I did that before. I went to Costa Rica on my birthday, 2012. And 6 months before that, I did 950 calories a day, every day, low carb. And I lost like 60 pounds in 5 months.
Wow,
but that was
right.
torture.
Yeah. Okay.
I haven't had the motivation to go back to that kind of strict diet since. So on a normal calorie intake of like, I think I eat about 1,500 calories a day, unless I'm being, it's my birthday or something like that.
Yep.
But, I stay heavy at that calorie limit. So and it's part of the reason I went back to school and got my master's degree. I was trying to figure out, why can't I lose weight like everybody else can on a low carb diet? What is wrong with me? And I have a lot of sympathy for Jimmy Moore and for other people who struggle to keep their weight off or to lose weight, even, restricting your diet greatly.
Right.
It just, something's there. I don't know what that is biochemically, but there's some of us that don't respond properly to a ketogenic diet. And I would love, man, if I could find out what that is and figure it out, I would write a website on that and books and just to help people out like that. But,
all right, let's drill down to that. I have a theory on that. And
you do?
Yes, I do. And it's not that one's positively stressed themselves or producing their own internal sugar. So, I mean, that's one way of doing it. Somebody's always stressed, so it doesn't matter what their diet's like. They're still producing their sugar, via glucagon, the stress to glucagon to their liver. And so therefore diet's almost irrelevant relative to sugar, therefore relative to insulin. That's a phenomena, but let's push that to a side and take that variable out. My thinking is this. Here's what I discovered. I didn't want to make it about me, but I'll jump quickly. Because the last...
No, I want to make it about you because I want to hear this theory.
Yeah, well, no, that's not what the podcast's about. Okay. All right. So at last I went to the Low-Carb conference in Florida this year, and I love Doug Reynolds and the people that show up there, and it's always fun and blah, blah, blah. So Georgia Edie presented. I've seen her present a couple times before, and I've talked with her, and somebody else had presented. So Paul Mabry, who I'll be talking with tomorrow, they're all about the zero carb. So I'm thinking, 20, very low carb diet, or the classic ketogenic diet, is like a few berries away from a zero carb diet in essence. And so I thought, all right, I've come so far. I was the vegan in medical school for the most part until I realized it didn't work for me. So I said, why don't I experiment with that? What's the worst that could happen? And I'm big into measuring, at least initially, and doing the biomarkers of the glucose and the ketones. And so I said, at least I keep track of that, and then I can go on and get my own blood work. And so this ended up being something. And so my diet now is boringly simple, but it works for me, and I enjoy it. It's primarily is about meat, but it's fish and chicken as well. It's almost nothing else. And I do put... we've read all about the MCT diet back in epilepsy, and they were using it in the 60s, and then Hutton Locker made his study on MCT diet, and now it's one of the 4 diets for epilepsy, and supposedly offers a lot more freedom. But here's the theory that I come up with. There's something about zero carb that has made me drop 5 pounds. I didn't really need 5 pounds to be dropped. I don't need to have my,
Really?
Yep. I don't need to. And so we've been doing this since February.
Because you're lean. That surprises me because you're so lean already.
Right. I mean, every guy wants to sort of feel they can reveal something. In with themselves. I don't mean walking on the beach or anything else. And I'm 61. I do like to work out, and I've always was a competitor, swimmer, triathlons, all those things. But you tended to always have, more fat. And so my fat's down to sometimes below 20%. This is not me counting calories now. And so I think, well, what happened here? And so my fat, so how do I get my fat in my zero carb way of doing things? I actually do pour on C8, the C8 that I like. And so that's it. I like spices and cooking, and Judy's very creative about all that. And so, but for every dinner, I pour on my C8. I don't have a fatty coffee. I do have coffees, throughout the day, but I'm actually segueing more into herbal teas. But so my theory is something happened between zero carb and the classic ketogenic diet. And I think there's that. And I also think there's something about the source, the ketogenicity of the fat you use. So I think those two factors cobbled together. So I've cobbled together the MCT diet, and I'll call it the C8 MCT diet, with the zero carb. And I think there's something to it. Can I explain it? I can go deeper than what I just did. I think I think it actually goes into the whole glucagon idea. And that was an idea from, was it the 80s? That, it's not all about insulin. It's also about maybe glucagon is just, popping up a little bit too, meaning stimulating the liver for gluconeogenesis, too early. And so we're stopping it here because we're all...
let me just comment there. Let me just comment on something there that just came to mind when you said that. Dr. Ryan and I have written in our diabetes books about the role of glucagon in bathing, the pancreas as a feedback mechanism, right? So your alpha cells release insulin, and then you get it floods the cellular compartments there, and then that causes a glucagon response, which is a feedback mechanism.
Right.
So, it makes me wonder if it's something to do with that.
Right. And I like that. You got,
feedback mechanism.
I think absolutely. And so this was, I forgot the kind of the father of the whole glucagon theory, but I think it goes back to the 70s. Yeah, 76. I actually did a podcast on it. Sorry, I can't remember his name.
That's all right.
And so there's that aspect of it. And so anyway, because I couldn't...
So you don't eat any dairy, right? No dairy.
Definitely don't eat dairy. And dairy is a whole separate issue with me. In fact, I'm into a trilogy of anti-dairy. Well, I'm just sort of presenting the information, but the takeaway is, dairy has... IGF-1, it has cow estrogens. You can just have the conversation on IGF-1. And so for my naturopathic part...
the more...
Yeah, and it's associated with certain kids. I mean, for autistic kids that came in, you took them off dairy, obviously took them off wheat as well, but it was like, no, we're not going to say maybe take them off dairy or take them... Dairy is gone, and they would have improvement. I'm not saying you would reclaim them. And so, and there's even a thing called...
Yeah, even butter, too, you think?
Butter tends
even
to
butter
be...
with a little bit of...
Yeah, I think butter is culpable there. And, clearly you can argue academically, no, it doesn't have the casein and so on and so forth. But, it kissed casein at some point. and because...
Yeah, it just makes me wonder because, all the times that I've struggled over the last couple of years, or really the last 5 years, and not being able to figure out why can't I lose weight on a regular ketogenic diet, 20 carbs a day and sometimes 10 carbs when I was really being strict. And, the weight just doesn't, I'll lose a pound and then gain a pound, lose 5 pounds, gain 5 pounds. It just doesn't consistently drop. And dairy is the one thing that I have never given up because I love it. And I'll tell you, over the last...
you're going to, well, I mean, I would say that I would, I'm using it figuratively, I would coach you through, saying, absolutely, however you get out of dairy, because the biggest thing behind dairy, dairy is such an issue. It's really interesting. I like the thing behind the story. So casein is primarily, so it's casein and whey are the proteins in dairy. Duh. Okay, well, in human breast milk, which are all humans, and so we all had some of that, or we had a formula based on that at some point, it's really like 20% casein and the rest is whey. And they do affect insulin, independent from glycemic index or any of these other things. But there's a thing when casein is digested, a branch is breaking off the way I look at it, a string of peptides that is called casomorphine. So and these little branch that's broken off. So casomorphine means it's an opiate. It actually connects with the opiate receptors. And so for that mammal, human, cow, donkey, reindeer, horse, that little branch that's broken off that happens really across the board is a different kind of casomorphine. So it happens to be with cows, and you can really get into different kinds of cows, but let's just say there's one healthy cow out there, and that's all we're going to talk about to compare, is that the first thing is the ratio of casein to whey is now, of all the protein in cow milk, 80% is casein and 20% is whey. And in addition, casomorphine, they call it beta-casomorphine, that particular type, those string of peptides is a very potent opiate. So the reason you like casein, well, in essence, the casein you do like, the reason you like...
Yeah, and that's how it feels sometimes. It feels like it's an addiction.
It is. Well, University of Michigan and Yale both put out a study.
I think you're right about that, because when I think about how I feel when I eat dairy, I feel so good. Like if I have some cheese or, I have some yogurt or whatever, I just feel great. My brain sparks and I'm like, wow, I feel great, and
Yeah. Well, the problem was that I always hated through naturopathic school. It was like, you just tell them don't eat dairy. And that's true. You got the improvement. But why was that? And they go, well, it's for cows. That still didn't answer the question. Now I got it, because even human milk makes a case of morphine. And that function is to bond the baby to the mother, so the baby comes back and says, I want more milk. So it's to bond. It's to bond the calf to the cow and saying, oh, you want more of that little druggie, don't you? You want some of that druggie. So you
Holy crap.
So
I never knew that.
So that's the answer. That's part of the answer, actually, by the way. So that's why you like it.
I never knew that. That makes perfect sense, because it's the same thing with like lactoferrins, right? Yep. It's something you get from the mother to help oh my gosh. I never thought of it like that.
So you're a drug addict, see? So that's it. You're a drug addict, and that's the and so I go. So I remember back with patients, I'd say, well, just go to goat's cheese. That was marginally better, but it's not clearly, so I'm in a no dairy, and when I get weak, I'll do a goat's cheese thing, and Judi likes to, and she doesn't have the same problem.
Do you eat chocolate at do you eat
chocolate? Yeah, we have, and so what I do, I'll mix it.
Okay, because I feel like I have the same reaction to chocolate. So I need you to turn your great brain toward that problem. What is it about chocolate? I don't know if it's the theobromine or whatever it is, but when I eat chocolate, and even like just unsweetened chocolate, just straight out, because I buy Calibo because it's just got this flavor that you can eat it straight with no sugar and it's still good. And I have that stuff, and it's like my brain is on steroids for thought. I mean, I'm just like sharp focus and feel really good, and and I try to stay away from it because it just because I have unsweetened chocolate, then I want some sweetened chocolate. Now I'm down the slope, right? Having sugar. So
I think you can have your cake and eat it too on this one, but the problem is presenting similar tastes tends to drive you back to a substance addictive issue. So, but with if you can find the chocolate without the sweetener, I add in stevia. It works for me. It's a hunt to find whatever works for you. Other people add other sweeteners, but if you can sub it out for a non-sugar and obviously you don't do.
Yeah, I when I'm desperate, I'll go melt that. I have cocoa mass from Calibo, some big dark chips, and I'll melt that and put erythritol in there, to sweeten it.
Yeah,
and that takes some of the edge off of it. But it's tough, It is. And the dairy thing is definitely an issue for me, I would say. And this whole bonding the baby to the mom thing, that's complete new to me. Wow. That really turns it on its head.
It does. But the thing is,
no wonder.
That keeps you coming back. The problem is within all of that, you have IGF-1, and I believe IGF-1 is the culprit. And we're pretending it's the good cow, is grass-fed, and, it doesn't have a ton of antibiotics.
Oh, you're talking about the A1 to A2?
Yeah, that's a whole nother thing. Yeah, I think that's an interesting story. But I think it's really the IGF-1 that is the driver for various autoimmune diseases, and there's some evidence of that. So
Dr. Runyon, I think I don't know that he doesn't have the same theory you do, but he thinks there's something wrong with he won't eat dairy either because he's afraid as a type 1 diabetic that it's going to set off something else for him.
Well, absolutely. No,
he's cut dairy out of his diet as well.
Yep. Yeah. No, I actually, since you had the history of family history of diabetes, this is what I would tell patients. There's no freaking way you're going to do dairy. I don't know how to break it to you. I'll make it soft to you. I'll hold your hand kind of thing, but you're not doing dairy. These are your choices. I make it that stark. So because to be in the middle and not to be 100% dairy free, you can have your moments now and then, is not to do any good. You have to be 100% off it. We're talking all, and it is a step. Once you're over there, we all have our substance.
Yeah, and that's a tough one because it's such a social food, right? If you go out with people to a bar, you're going to have something that has cheese on it, or cream sauce or whatever. You can't. You have a really hard time going out, with friends and stuff. I mean, you can. Everybody's an adult. You can make your choices or whatever. But if you're a dairy addict, then watching somebody eat nachos and not having any ads
I know. I draw the line in socially. You have one behavior. At home, you have another behavior. You know what I mean? And it's more like the at home recommendation. When you're out, I don't say when in Rome, do it Rome. To the degree you're comfortable, and if you feel you're making yourself socially weird, then jump in and enjoy it. But
the thing about that, and I'll tell you just from my own experience, when you do something like that, like you give yourself a leeway to have what you want when you go out with your friends. So the next morning you're sick as a dog, right? Or you're sick when you go to bed that night because of what you ate. And those are really good reinforcements to think to yourself, is it worth it?
Yeah.
You know, do I really want that? Like if I have, you know, I just don't eat junk food, because if I were to eat, like I remember when I was in my 20s, I loved Little Debbie cake rolls. Loved those things because they're sweet and salty. And I would eat those, and Cheetos and Mountain Dew and all this crap. And this was when I was in my 20s. And I remember like having episodes where I had to lay down after I ate like that because I was so dizzy and woozy. And I didn't know anything then, so I had no idea that that's hypoglycemia, right? So, you know, and so at the time I'm like, what is wrong with me? And I couldn't drive long distances, you know, because I would take the Cheetos and the Mountain Dew in the car with me. So 30 minutes into it, I'd have to pull over.
Wow.
You know, and all this stuff these symptoms that I manifested when I was in my 20s, I wish I had somebody around to say to me, that's hypoglycemia. You're driving up your insulin, you know, whatever. Yeah. I didn't know it at the time, but I think about how I ate back then, and it's a wonder I survived it. Because today, if I were to eat a Little Debbie cake roll, I would be so sick. I would never want one again. You know, and that's the thing about once you start changing your diet, people just attribute things to old age, or, you know, my joints hurt because I'm getting old or whatever. It's like, no, it's what you're eating. Yep. What are you eating that's bothering your body? Yep. Because you shouldn't have, you know, those kinds of pain. I don't care if you're 70, you know, or 80 or 90. Yep. It's all diet related in my head, you know.
I agree. Well, we're going to expect big things whenever I talk to you next, because since you discovered something that you can you can use for yourself, we're going to see if you implemented it.
I'm going to be looking at dairy very differently right now.
Next book. All right, I'll help you co-author that one. But it's funny because I for this Facebook group, I tried to summarize. It's actually a complicated issue, but I don't think I oversimplified it. It's taken me a while to come here, but I presented it, and people got back and saying, this is a little confusing, you know, because you can't say it's black or white. You know, it's this or it's that. These are the big tendencies, the casein and the IGF-1, and then you throw in a few other things that, you know, you have to plow through a lot of technical stuff to come to a simple conclusion that maybe the majority of people, it's true for.
Maybe we should write a book, Carl.
I think it'd be great. I mean, there's in the future. I think that this is it's been covered, but I think this is why we talk about it now in the ketogenic diet world that we're sort of self-defining. There's a lot of stupid things that are being said. And just not being said. So like
lately.
Well, look at your path. Your path was about food quality right up front. You said, you know, I improved the quality of my food. It's like they don't want to talk about food quality. It's like, no, let's not talk about it. You know?
No, they just want you to take an exogenous ketone.
Exactly. Yeah. And then so dairy's even.
That's why I don't have those on my website, because I think that is so bogus. And I know Dominic really supports that whole arm of this, because he's just wanting to get the information out. Yep. So I respect that from him, and he's a bodybuilder, so that's his crowd or whatever. But some of them, they steal stuff from my website. I'm constantly having to go to Copyscape and nail them for taking stuff from my website.
Good for you.
These guys, these exogenous ketone guys, and they are constantly hitting me up. Hey, can we put it on your website? No, you can't put it on my website, because my feeling about it is, I'm not saying they're bad people or whatever, but they're just capitalizing on what they see as the new thing. Right. And which is, you know, this is the United States, so that's cool. And I make money on the line as well. So I'm not dissing them. Right. I'm just saying, you know, if you're going to talk about something, you probably should know what you're talking about. And two, even with all the information that's out there in the research, nobody has looked at exogenous ketones, you know, in a controlled study. There might be a few out there, but that I'm not aware of recently. But my feeling is that I don't think we haven't done enough research to know how endogenous ketones work, really. So to say that you know how exogenous ketones are going to work, I don't know. I think you're making a leap there, and I'm just not ready to make. Yep. So. You're
reminding me of something, though. I'm, you know, we're both spontaneous people, and that's what a podcast for. I forgot to say back about the weight loss and the marrying the zero carb with the MCT diet concept. Why would you choose C8? It is the most ketogenic. Yeah, I think I'm making these words up as I speak, but most ketogenic. And so why is that? Why is that of a benefit? Well, because we do know, I mean, this is speaking of the exogenous ketone, that's what triggered this, is that, all right, they're going to suppress, their big buzzword is they're going to suppress the appetite with exogenous ketones, and therefore you're going to eat less, and therefore you're going to lose weight. That's their theory. So what I'm saying, cobbling these two together, my experience of this is that I don't mind not eating for the whole day, and I've never had that clarity before, that mental clarity of not having diet saying, why don't you go down and grab some bacon and mayo? That's just down there around the corner. Not that that's a bad thing. That's still on the keto thing. But I'm saying that this is the first time that going out eating hasn't sort of been ruminating in the back of my mind in some small way. So I think that the ketones in that, yes, it's the ketogenic diet, but I think that issue of either no carbs or increased ketogenicity with the MCT plays a role there too. And that's the last capsule. Wow. That's the last part of it, because we've jumped around. Anyway, no, I agree. And
no, that's okay, because I'm looking at your C8 keto oil in front of me. I bought some from Amazon, and I like this oil. So it doesn't have any flavor, which is so great, because I've tried to use, the jet fuel.
Right.
And I've tried to use some of the other products that are out there, the ketone salts, just so if somebody asked me about it, I'd know what's out there. But you still have this on Amazon?
Yeah, absolutely. Keto? We're trying to gradually become more sophisticated and move off Amazon. But my whole thing about that product and also the sustainability and supporting all that, it's a big deal. But the C8, some people are, I hate to sort of say it, but it's almost a product for intelligent people. It's condescending to say that, and so what I mean is some people will actually get it and they'll drink it. And, no, you wouldn't drink olive oil that way. You wouldn't drink, avocado oil that way. You would, use a little bit, put it with food, put it on food. Yeah, maybe put it in your coffee. But what I've learned is having it as an ingredient as opposed to guzzling it because I wanted something to eat, to suppress my appetite. That's probably going to give you heartburn sooner than later because you just can't digest,
or tear up your stomach.
Right. So we make a mayo with it. So I have mayo C8. That's a way of doing it. And sometimes even add C8.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
Yeah. And so, you put it in these things that you use anyway, and there it is. And then sometimes I'll add the C8 to the mayo on the other stuff. So that's where it's contextual. And that's why I say it's a product for the intelligent, because
that's a great idea, because I don't like avocado mayonnaise. Mm-hmm. I don't like the taste of it. And I don't like olive oil mayonnaise because I don't like the taste of olive oil.
Right.
So, in mayonnaise, I'm so used to the whole Hellmann's, right? And I like that flavor. So, because the C8 doesn't have any flavor, it might come out just fine. I'm going to try that.
Well, I'll send you our recipe, because we put in collagen, and then Judi even has
I need to come live at your house for a little while.
Yeah, we'll switch. Right.
Learn all this stuff from you.
That's right. Well, if you come in this summer, you'll get your share of clams anyway, so that's a good thing. Good B12.
Yeah.
That's funny, but so that's my context of where I come from, and I do believe it's genuinely naturopathic. Is that you choose and start where you are. You make better choices. You put them in the context of making some food for yourself. And not everybody has to grow their own greens and make their own, kill their own cow, raise their. No, I'm not asking that. I'm saying a little of that will, first of all, think of all those preservatives you won't have to eat because you're making your own mayo. And I agree that the Marxist and mayo, great idea with the avocado oil, tastes terrible. But I'm thinking...
I don't care for it.
I know. I think he missed, but
I bought a jar of his mayo. It was his mayo. It showed up at Publix here. And I was like, wow, way to go, Mark. Kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, this is on the mainstream. So, and I bought it, and it's okay. It's not horrible.
Right.
I just don't like the taste of avocado and mayonnaise. It tastes weird, so I'm sorry, Mark, but it's some people who love avocado might love it. It's not, like I said, it's not terrible. It's just not the mayo that I prefer.
No, he put in rosemary too as a clever thing, and I think that mucked it up. But we're half thinking if we were bazillionaires, we would be out with our own mayo. But right now, it's ain't gonna happen.
Dave Asprey.
Yeah, right. All those things. So
he's doing well too with his products. So, but nice man. But I just don't have time. That's a huge, to make products, I'll just tell you from a business standpoint, to create products and get them on the market, that you got to have a team of people. And that's a huge undertaking, shipping and all that stuff. I more power to them, but you got to build it to a point where you can pay people to do that for you, because
that's true.
And I'm not, and like I told you at that conference, my goal is freedom, right? So I don't want to build a business that I have to manage by, and then manage employees and all that. So that's just not the route I want to go down.
I agree. It's getting a little easier than that. For instance, we drove down to Chattanooga to visit with a special manufacturer that would do batches. And then you scale with somebody like that will take on a share of the responsibility. So it's a little easier, but it's a lot of looking for people who are A, honest. Who would have thought you'd say something as obvious as that? And B, have the capability. And 3, you like them and can collaborate with them. Anyway. Neither here nor there. Yeah. So, Ellen, I'm going to bring this to a close.
So we should probably get back to talking about.
Okay. No, go ahead.
Ketogenic diets and diabetes.
I know. I would think so. But I also wanted to say is that
that's what we promised we'd talk about.
That's right.
But I'm enjoying this conversation. We can keep going.
I know. Part of me is I serve to serve you, and whatever comes out is worth listening to. So there you go. You have a presage, if that's the right word. You've unknowingly been ahead of the curve, however you want to explain it. You can say lucky this, lucky that. And I'm not just talking about the keywords on your website. So for instance, in the diet with you and Dr. Munyon is like, now diabetes is back front and center. You have whole Virta Health coming out there.
Oh yeah. Virta's really driven that. Yeah.
Right. They've really driven. So consequently, Dr. Fung has come out with, his diabetes book. Yes, it was in the works for a while ago, but where's the first diabetes book? For my viewing of the quality of the books I look at, it was basically you and Dr. Munyon saying, let's cover this. And, you've covered, and you guys covered type 1, and that's I would say that's extremely good, and this is before everybody else. And so you have wherever this inner thought is, or maybe you don't even think about it, it just happens. You puts you at the cutting edge of saying, no, these things can be controlled, and I know they can be controlled. And say one other little thing, when I read the studies from Virta Health and the blog, and which we probably all do, kind of feel obligated to read, is that there was a huge study, and it showed to the world you can change diabetes. Check that box, done. But I think you can change diabetes even more than the numbers that they had given, and there's a lot of unanswered questions, and that's how it should be. It goes to the next study, the next study, the next study. Yeah. But so you guys, right? So I am talking to, and take this in a positive way, the horse's mouth in terms of coming out first with, let's talk about ketogenic diet, diabetes, type 1, type 2. What made you even take that step? Because others hadn't yet, really.
Yeah. So for me, I had my own symptoms for type 2, but then I met Dr. Runyon, and it's funny the way we met, because I have a friend down in Florida, Philip Blair, who's also trying to start a company that worked with larger companies to turn their healthcare treatment over to him to teach people about ketogenic diet so that they could reduce their healthcare costs. And it never caught on, but he's in Florida, and I asked him if he knew of a physician that could help me with my younger sister who has some issues, and he gave me Dr. Runyon's name. So when I talked to Dr. Runyon, he's like, I know your website. And I was like, really? And, we got to talking. So it was really interesting the way we met. But, a couple years into this, we've become friends, and that's when we decided to write the books together. So it's really his knowledge that made those books so great, because here is a physician who's a type 1 diabetic, and you can read his story in my book, in the book that we wrote, both books, because it's an incredible story. I mean, he developed latent autoimmune diabetes at 38 years old and tried to follow the ADA recommendations. Here's a physician who's really, he's got an engineer's type mind. So he's all about tracking and numbers and he's trying to follow the ADA to the letter, and his HbA1c was 6.5 or 7, which is, damaging. And he's having hypoglycemic episodes 5 or 6 times a week. I mean, so he almost killed himself because his meter broke and he wasn't measuring his sugar correctly. Wow. And he gave himself too much insulin. I mean, he's had a couple of death-defying episodes, and talks about that in his story. And then he was watching or listening to a podcast, and Lauren Cordain was on there talking about the paleo diet. And that got him off on to doing research on that. And then that research led him to the ketogenic diet. And when he started that ketogenic diet, it was an epiphany for him that he now has one hypoglycemic episode a year, maybe.
Wow.
He ran a triathlon with no extra sugar.
Wow.
Like he didn't bring any sugar with him to the triathlon. He ran that triathlon, the swimming and the biking, all of it on ketones.
Nice.
And he has a picture of himself in the book, doing that. So he's really, through his personal experience is the framework that from which we wrote those books. So to me, that's really the value in our books, is that it's coming from somebody that's lived this.
Right.
He and me from the type 2 perspective, and him from the type 1 perspective. And it's, I feel like our information is life-changing for people who have diabetes. I really do.
Right.
And I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but I really think, if you're a type 1 diabetic, and they're only about 5% of the population. And they kind of get left behind because there's so many type 2s, like 95% of people who have diabetes are type 2, which is totally reversible with diet. But the type 1s are the ones really struggling out there because this is a permanent condition for them.
Yep.
And it's a moment to moment thing of what is your blood sugar. I mean, you're literally doing the job of your pancreas.
Yep.
So it's something that's on top of your mind all day long if you're taking care of yourself. So I really wanted to write a book specifically. And the other thing is, if you're an adult type 1, you're even farther behind because everybody talks about type 1 as if it's a child disease, and it is a child disease, and it's very rampant in children. But once those kids are grown, they really don't get a lot of support.
No, I agree.
So I wanted to write a book for type 1 diabetics who are older, and so that's what we did.
Excellent. That brings it into a whole new field. I mean, you sort of woke up a whole couple generations of saying, oh, wow, I don't have to give up on myself. It's not just like I didn't get it.
Yeah.
And I think you gave a lot of hope, and I think others are following you. I just want to interject because the history of type 1 diabetes and its treatment is really pretty interesting. And I know you know this, but, before insulin was isolated up in Toronto by Banting and was it McLeod that and Best and Colin, I don't know all 4 names, so I call them the Toronto 4, certainly under Banting, is that, it was called the Allen's diet, and he was actually a New England doctor between New York and Boston, and he did a calorie restricted ketogenic diet. This is even before the ketogenic diet was so coined in 1921. And so the thing is that they would, type 1 diabetics, children, of course, would die usually within a year. And that's basically what happened. So on this calorie restricted, low carb diet, in essence, I can't remember if it was high fat or not, they would live for maybe 5 years, but they'd still die a pretty miserable death because they'd been starving themselves. I mean, there's only so much, low carb, hypo.
Yeah, you can only lose like half of your muscle weight before you die.
So they gave him 5 years, and that was a big deal, and that was the definitive way to treat. And so from that, now insulin comes in, and what I couldn't understand from being a physician when Jocelyn is the name here, and he was obviously one of the movers and shakers back of that era as well, is that you needed to have so many carbs in your diet, and I thought, well, is that sort of antithetical to how this all got started? And so I was trying to figure out, why is that, other than it's corruption and big pharma, and that's always an answer you can throw at a lot of things. But here's what happened is that, so Banting comes in and he isolates the insulin, and he gives it to his first child, and they actually give it to all these comatose patients, and by the time they got the last patient in the room, some of the first ones are coming out of their coma. However, it didn't.
Wow.
It didn't. Can you imagine that? I mean, you have all these people that are on their way out. He says, "Let's just go down." You couldn't do this again. And they just gave insulin to a room of comatose. I think there was like 20 some odd patients in the room, and they didn't even get to the last patient, and the first patient was coming out of the coma. And not everybody had the same. So I know, amazing. So, but back to the why carb is part of the recommendation is that Banting, when he started doing it, and the 4 of them, is that it didn't work for everybody. Some were too far gone, for one, and as adults would come back in and say, "Hey, can you help me?" They're just too far gone, but they didn't know how to dose it. and sometimes they overdosed. And they actually, and it's reported, they actually killed, quote unquote, killed people. And so then Banting said, I need to have help. And so he invited up Wilder, Woodyard, Jocelyn, Allen, and I'm missing a few, Peterman. So they said, we need to figure out what our dosing regime is. And so they spent a month in Toronto with the Toronto team that are about to get the Nobel Prize in a year or so subsequent. And they had to figure out the dosing because they said, as good as this is, we might inadvertently kill people. And so what they did is in the ADA is that's why that buffer of carbs are in there, because they said if these people had more carbs, we wouldn't have killed them. Times have changed and things need to be changed, but now I have greater sympathy for why that's there as opposed to they're stupid and controlled by big pharma.
Yeah, that's I hadn't known that. That makes sense. It's like, and I know that Dr. Bernstein has. He kind of talks about that a little bit, like why he asked an ADA person why they recommend carbohydrates for people, and it was basically they were worried about at this point, in modern times, a lawsuit, from hypoglycemia that might kill someone.
Yeah.
So, but they are just kind of stuck on that, and their whole, and the dietitians are stuck on the idea that your brain's got to have 145 grams of carbohydrate to function, and it's just dogma, right?
Yep.
And people have a hard time letting go of dogma. So.
Yep. No, exactly that. Fascinating. So I just wanted to. I think history has a part to play, but I also wanted to have the current history of your part to play because. I think you and Dr. Runyon sort of have set the stage, and you didn't come in as a general reference. You came in and nailed it. I think that's great. Yeah,
I agree. I mean, like I say, I agree. I think, and here's the other thing I'm going to say. It's going to sound really conceited, and I'm sorry in advance for it. But my website was the only website out there 5 years ago talking about ketogenic diet. I found Dom's site like about a year later. He had started that blog when he started doing his research about a year later. So my website was the first one out there. It's really comprehensive. It's like 180 pages. I'm still adding pages to it. And I have to say, sometimes I grit my teeth because I feel like this whole bombing right now that we're going through with all the people that don't really know what they're talking about is because of my website. Because all the information was in.
Yep.
I don't know how many websites are out there that have taken stuff from my website and started building their own. Like, there were a couple out there that I had to go, hey, that's my writing. You need to change that.
Right. I'm glad you did.
But, and I don't know how many books are on Amazon with people just, doing keyword researches and taking stuff from my website. There's probably, I don't know, 5 or 10 little, $1.99 books that have, whole passages from my website in them. But,
I agree.
And whatever, I'm not going to chase those people down. They're just trying to make a buck. But it's right now I'm just kind of have backed off my whole keto thing because it's just being bombed right now with information that's, I think, not genuine, not researched, and not specific to people who could really use it. Like if you tell people to take exogenous ketones to lose weight, that to right there to me is like, you don't even know what you're talking about because you're just telling people to eat extra calories to lose weight.
Yep.
Because that's all they are,
is
extra calories. They're not going to, if you're not already in ketosis, your body's just going to process them like any other, nutrient that comes in. And if you're eating in excess of what you need in terms of calories, they're just going to get stored as fat. Or they're going to get burned first. Whatever part of it is the MCT oil is going to get burned off, which means you're not burning your own body fat. So it's just, all those guys, the Prove It guys and the Keto OS and all those people, I know they mean well and they're trying to help people. But, and if you're, 24% body fat and you want to lose, the last 4 pounds, this is, and be told that you can do it this way. I don't know. I'm just, okay, that doesn't make any sense. So, so I kind of have to step back from the whole thing because I just get tired of rolling my eyes and walking away, right? So I'm just going to let the wave crest, and then my website will still be there when everybody goes off to do something else, So it's right now it's just mania out there.
It is. I appreciate that. I'm with you with the same sentiments, and The analogy is good, and I hope it is a wave that crashes because I get so tired of, that's the thing about the internet. You can get disinformation out there as fast as you can get, actually faster than you can get genuine information out there.
Yeah,
and
I
you can
agree.
make it sound simpler and more inducing than usually what is the real world. Which still, I think the ketogenic
Yeah.
diet is pretty simple.
Yeah, and part of the
Wow.
problem is that the people who have the biggest megaphone, like Jillian Michaels, just wrote the other day that ketogenic diet is a fad diet. I'm like, okay, so
Yeah.
obviously hasn't done her research at all, but she has this
Right.
huge megaphone. She's on the Today Show or whatever, and it's like,
Hmm.
okay, well, whatever. I'm not going to respond to every one of those. It's just not worth it. It's just not worth it to me. So people are going to speak, and
Yeah, well, I'm saying don't disappear because you're one of the voices that needs to stay in the arena. But I understand it just gets disappointing. So yeah, let's have the
I
wave
won't
crash.
disappear. I'm just
Good.
waiting for the wave to crest and crash. So, and my website, I'm not going to take my website down. My books are still available on Amazon. It's just that they're basically being drowned out right now by all the other stuff that's out there. So, because and but the thing is, they'll still be there, right? The baseline.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, I agree. I read this book once called 1,000 True Fans, and it was obviously on marketing, and that sort of took the pressure off of what I'm trying to do. Gradually, it's like I'm not trying to convert the world, and it's same to you. You have more than 1,000 true fans, by the way. So. You have people that believe in what you're doing and you're good and they're going to spread it. And you really just, focus on those. For me, I focus on the 1,000 true fans that will think like me and appreciate what I think. That's probably 1% of 1% of 1% and times 23. And so it's a very small group, but that's the purity of people who care about what we care about. And you
I
have
think
that.
when you come when you come from a point of view of fixing your own health, I just think you're way more authentic for people.
Yes.
I mean, you've been there, you've done that, and you're trying to help people avoid some of the mistakes you made or whatever. But, there's a lot of people out there writing that never had a weight problem in their life and, never were insulin resistant, and they think they know all about ketogenic diets. And maybe they have a perspective that's different from mine, and maybe that's good. It probably is good. Somebody who's a bodybuilder who leans out another, 2% to win a competition, that's important information for somebody that's in that realm. So I'm not dissing anybody, but I just know what I know, and I see a lot of stuff out there that doesn't line up with the scientific facts, and I just, like I say, I just try to not look at it and go away, and not, try to fix it because I can't fix it. There's plenty of there's my website, there's Dom's website, he's, and all his work and Tom's work, and there's lots of information out there that people can, find what they need to find. So
I agree.
Anyway.
I agree. By the way, did you know that speaking of bodybuilders, it's another book there. I know you're going to say me write a book that you can collaborate with on Dom on bodybuilders ketogenic diet. But what I was about to say is that
you don't have time.
No, that's true. That's true. That is that some bodybuilders are actually getting to inject insulin. I mean, they're using insulin as a growth hormone. So it's, and they've already used casein in whey and for those same similar reasons. Because it's, catabolic, but it's like, and you go, seriously? Absolutely. So there's common sense and there's others that just don't care. And there you go. Well,
you have a goal, right? Get any means that you have available to you, you're going to use. So
yep.
injecting insulin's not a good idea, but
no, it's amazing it's even possible.
As the guys in Toronto found. So
yeah. I agree. Well, I'm going to wrap it up. I so appreciate your time. And it's always been spontaneous conversations you and I have and the few times we've met. I hope that in the future I can call you again and we'll be even more topics.
Absolutely. Anytime. This was great fun. Yeah. And I love it when I know so much about ketogenic diets that when I learn something, I get all excited. It's like, it's a new fact to put into my picture, kind of thing. So I learned quite a bit from you today. This is great.
Okay. That was inadvertent. I meant
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, absolutely. You're always welcome. I learned much more from you. I'll send you our mayo recipe. You can make it home, and
Oh yeah, great. Thank you.
It just makes it easier.
That'd be great. Yeah, let's talk again, and then we can talk. You maybe talk about more of the details about diabetes and cancer, and if people want to know that. I have other podcasts out there that information. I actually like this talk because it's very different from anything else I've done. because I've done several podcasts with Jimmy and a couple other places, and I've gone into all the details of diabetes and cancer and stuff. So my thoughts on that are out there already. So this is unique and it's different. It's good. So yeah.
Good. I appreciate that. All right, my friend. Until next time, I'll be emailing you, and thanks for all your work, and thanks for being the pioneer. I know you don't see yourself that way, but you are. Take care.
Oh, I appreciate that. All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. For anybody who has any questions, feel free to contact me on our Facebook group, Keto Naturopath. Same name as our podcast. I'm open to any questions, and we plod through the good and the bad, the difficult and the easy, week after week.